Well, that would be really exciting to see the presenter for tonight's session. I'm excited to be joining you tonight. But of course, our mission, or should I say our purpose, is to map the world. So quite fitting to have a picture or a map on the screen. You'll notice that that particular map doesn't have any political boundaries, and we intend to really engage with people of all cultures, all backgrounds. And so I'm really excited to have you joining us this evening. And I trust that the message that I share and that Janine and I will be discussing after the session is going to be of value to you. But more importantly, that it's going to get you to think about things that perhaps you haven't thought about before. Janine and I were just chatting before the show started about the importance of being open to new ideas. And sometimes it requires us to put our own preconceived ideas to the side and listen intently to a message without prejudice. And so I hope that this evening you're going to be engaged in a way that's going to have an impact, not only in your life, but in the lives of others. Previous session, or part one of personal leadership, we discussed the first 4 letters of leadership. Can you believe it? Just 4 letters. We didn't get to the rest. And we talked about the importance of knowing where you're going. So in order to lead others, you need to have the vision and to be able to see something that others aren't seeing. So whoever has the light ultimately ends up being the person who can show the way. The next letter that we talked about was being the example, and how important it is to recognize that people are watching you and I. And whether you're planning to be an example or not, people are taking the example that you're setting. And this is so clear when it comes to parenting. You know, the children that we raise turn out just like we do. They watch what you do. They don't listen to what you say. We talked also about the importance of accepting, not just accepting others for who they are, warts and all, but also to accept ourselves for who we are. You know, forgiveness is a very important tool in terms of being able to lead and to move forward, because as soon as you don't accept yourself, you end up retreating and have difficulty in leading others. And then finally, we talked about the value of discipline, and that discipline is actually the product of vision. People without vision cast off all restraint, which means people who lack vision also lack discipline. So that was the first part of personal leadership, and tonight we're going to move on with those letters of leadership. And the first one is the letter E, which stands for excellence. And so I'm going to talk a short bit about excellence. E also stands for effectiveness and efficiency. Effectiveness is baking a cake, let's say. Efficiency is baking the cake or baking the cake the same way. So firstly, effectiveness is baking the cake right. Efficiency is baking the right cake. Excellence is doing these two things together. And I trust that you and I will engage in a journey of never-ending improvement, because excellence is not perfection. Excellence talks about constant, never-ending improvement. It's the biggest room in the world today. And I trust that as you step into your future, which is literally every minute, every second of every day, as you step forward, that you make it your mission to learn and improve, or step and improve, step and improve. And this is not about competition against others. It's just about fine-tuning your own gifts and talents. Just this morning, we were talking about the different kinds of leadership, and each of the people in our meeting this morning lead in different ways. One of the areas that people lead in, or one of the people at the table was leading in the area of music. And you lead quite differently in music to how you would lead on the dance floor, perhaps, or maybe in the boardroom or on the battlefield. All of these places have different kinds of leadership, but one thing that's important is that we constantly strive for excellence. In other words, to improve ourselves constantly. The next letter that comes after that is the letter R, which talks about resolve. Resolve is not just having a resolution. Resolve is following through on that resolution no matter what. And I think it's different to being stubborn. I think in some families there is a sense of stubbornness, and I know that I've heard those words mentioned in different circles. But resolve means that you have complete conviction and that you will move forward irrespective of the obstacles that are lying in your path. Sometimes obstacles are merely path definers. They're not there to be dealt with. They're there to show you where you shouldn't go. And so resolve enables you to use those as markers on your route to your intended destination. But at the same time, you can turn those stumbling blocks that most followers might see. As a leader, you can turn those stumbling blocks into stepping stones. So resolve is about being resilient. It's about when life knocks you down, you get up again and you get moving forward. You never retreat. And I trust that you will develop your ability to follow through on the decisions that you make. Just recently, I was engaged with a group of people, and many of them made the resolution to follow through on a 20-day program. I mean, 20 days is so short in one's life. 20 days. In fact, in those 20 days, it's just 20 hours of commitment. And it's amazing how few people have the resolve to follow through on a decision after the mood in which they've made it has left them. You see, being able to do that is not only about having resolve, it's also about strength of character. And so I trust that you are going to be a person that's strong in character and that you're able to follow through on the resolutions that you take. Why not make today a start of a new year and make a new resolution to step into the future with absolute resolve and conviction, commitment to your vision, and not just any vision, but the one that's going to impact the lives of others. One of the words that came up this morning, or rather a set of words that came up this morning, was purpose, passion, and provision, kind of sticking together. And I need to talk about that and on a particular future session. But another set of words that came up was legacy, significance, and destiny. These are the kinds of things that should be driving our resolve. Not the material things that people are that people are chasing after. I don't think true leaders are chasing after material things. Yes, if you're the CEO of a company, believe it or not, most CEOs, all they're doing is trying to satisfy shareholders. So they're chasing after the money, in essence, beating the people. I'm talking about something very different. I'm talking about resolve that is purpose-driven, that is passion-driven, that is something that is already fully provided for when you step in faith. The S, or the letter S, talks about the word significance. And I'm a person who enjoys watching many of these space type episodes. So SpaceX is a company that I watch closely. Not because the person who started SpaceX is from the very city where I currently live, and that he went to school just 7 kilometers from my home. Not at all. But rather, I watch it because of how big things really are. You know, when you start looking at the universe and you look at the galaxies and things out there, you recognize how small we are. Yet we have something of significance to deliver. We, with the choices we make, with the words that we speak, can shape the future, can literally change the course of humankind. We can change history. And for me, if we focus not on ourselves, but look outwardly, then we can begin to connect with the things that really matter. So few people are looking at this concept of significance. Most people are chasing after success. And success is all about me, myself, and I. But if you want to lead people and you want to have great impact, you need to shift your focus from success to significance. And I trust that this word of significance is one that you're going to sign your name to. Both of those words have the same root. And interestingly, when I was looking at the word significance and its origin, it also has a strong link to seed. And seed, we talk about sowing the seeds of doubt. The seed that we sow is the words that we speak. So when we speak words, we are literally sowing seed that's going to produce the future. What seed have you sown today? What seed are you going to sow before you go to bed tonight? What seed are you going to speak in the quietness of your mind or in your heart? Are you going to speak what you have envisioned? Are you going to speak the vision that's on your heart? Or are you going to speak lack and the things that you do not want to see? This word significance is absolutely key in leading others. Another thing that's really important is following your heart. You know, I think I see so many leaders in the corporate environment that are following their head. And this was so evident when it came to the beginning of lockdown globally. There were companies that almost instantly shut up shop, or they retrenched huge numbers of staff because their focus was simply to follow their head without thinking about the people. And I think if you are a leader, you need to begin to listen to your heart, to put people before yourself. Think about their well-being first before you think about the shareholders. Have a long-term mindset, one that is focused on relationship building, not just the bottom line. Where is your heart? This is going to be tested when you move forward. You will find that when times get tough, that is when your motive is fully tested. And it's at that point that you will discover whether you listen to your head or you listen to your heart. I believe a good leader listens to their heart, directs the future with their heart, and makes day-to-day decisions based on where their heart is leading. I think we have time to do our last two letters this evening, and the one that is so key here is integrity. I think when it comes to John Maxwell and leadership, he would clearly put in the word influence over here. He says leadership is nothing but influence. And that is absolutely true. A leader influences other people. And that's why there's such a responsibility on what you and I do. But integrity is when what you speak and what you do are aligned. In fact, it goes further than that. It's when your thoughts, words, and deeds are in alignment. So integrity is tested when you make a decision to do something yourself. This is where personal leadership is so important. When you make a decision that you're going to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning and do 5 push-ups, a person of integrity is someone who follows through on that decision, and you will catch them 5 a.m. in the morning doing what they said they would do. So where is my and your integrity demonstrated in our day-to-day life? Are we following through on the words that we have spoken, or are we maybe a counterfeit, somebody who cannot be trusted? Sometimes we recognize things in the world because we are so familiar with it. We see corruption everywhere. I mean, people can talk about it easily. But corruption, in essence, is the opposite of integrity. And if we can see corruption, it means we're familiar with it. It means that we know too well how easy it is not to follow through on the decisions and choices we've made. And so this word integrity is something to work or to develop in your own life, in the quiet places where no one's looking. And when you get that integrity sound, you're going to be setting the platform for being a great leader, a leader of influence. And then finally, the last letter in the word leadership is passion. I mean, people love to follow someone who is passionate about where they're going. And you will see this in companies. There are those people who are appointed as leaders. There are others that seem to be anointed as leaders. People who naturally have an enthusiasm and excitement about where they're going. And typically, these are the people who actually started the companies. I think of Steve Jobs as an example of somebody who is absolutely passionate. You can bring somebody from outside who is skilled in many areas and who can be very effective in leading a company from a knowledge perspective. But sometimes those people lack the passion, they lack the enthusiasm. And so for you and I to be leaders, we need to engage in the things that we are passionate about. When you start doing what you were purposed to do, you naturally step into that role of leadership. And people begin to see your passion, and passion ignites passion. Whenever you walk into a room where there's a passionate person, it kind of lifts your spirit. And so I think passion is a really important element of good leadership. And so I trust that you are going to make it your mission to connect with your passion, because your passion and purpose are like Siamese twins. And when you do, the provision for that purpose will suddenly present itself. And I trust that when you do that, what's going to happen is people will begin to follow you because they are drawn to you through the passion that they feel. Remember that your name is on your flame. People will begin to know you by what you are passionate about. I hope that what I've shared with you this evening is something that excites you, and that you too are going to be engaged fully in your area of leadership. I'm going to play a short video, and Janine and I will come back and have a little chat with you regarding some of the thoughts that we've had on this aspect of leadership. So don't go away. We will see you in just a moment. Okay, Janine, it's always exciting to have you share your wisdom with us, and so nice to have you joining me this evening. And I'm just, I thought perhaps before we start with discussing the whole concept of leadership, maybe it's time just to tell us how you got connected with Map for Life, and maybe something in particular that has really stood out for you over the years that you've been part of Map.
So many years ago, around 20, I think it was 2011, 2012, I can't remember where I found out about the MAP meetings at Zoo Lake, but I started attending those, and I had so much fun. We did fascinating exercises. I recall specifically one where we created a business with nothing but a pencil and a piece of paper. We had a small group that we had to create these businesses. And what struck me was every table had an awesome business without money. So that was very exciting. And through the years, my journey with MAP changes the way you think, changes the way you operate. It changes the way you plan. it and also turns your focus to the important things. So and now my little business has been born and it's growing. So it's very exciting.
That is really nice to hear. I'm just remembering those early days at Zoo Lake. For those of you who are not from South Africa, if ever you visit Johannesburg, there's a wonderful park and lake where people go and sit, and there's a restaurant there. And we used to meet there on Saturday mornings once a month. And I'm sure there's many stories that have come out of that. But it reminds me that we need to really get back to those physical sessions again. It's so easy for us to, people talk about the technology and how wonderful the digital is. And yes, it enables us to reach many people, but nothing can replace that personal engagement and interaction. Like you said, sitting around a table and having a discussion. What
Yeah,
else? What else have you? I think just thinking about MAP itself. Is there something specific that you found that you use in other areas? I mean, you say you've started your own business now. Are there things that you've picked up from Map for Life? I shouldn't say are there, because I know there are, but there might be something significant that you've picked up during MAP that is now actually being useful or helping or equipping you in some way in the new business that you're busy growing.
So MAP, there's so many aspects of MAP, so yeah. I think in business, the planning aspect is enormous, breaking down bigger tasks and making them smaller. But, the MAP accountability, when you start your own business, it's sometimes a lonely journey, and you do get distracted, and it's very important to have your weekly MAP meeting, the MAP Cafe, so that you can be held accountable and people can actually help you to achieve your goals and get there. And the connections and networks in Map for Life are very, very, very powerful.
I'm typing something up here to put on the screen because you were talking about that aspect, and I thought maybe it's nice for people to see that there's many descriptions for MAP, and yes. One could be that, and Peter, I think when Peter was talking about this, he changed it slightly, and we had something like this. So this is the reason why it would be good for us to get back to meeting in person, because he talked about meeting awesome people. I think.
Absolutely, course, yeah.
So Janine, I mean, we met through that process. But continue. Sorry, I interrupted there.
No, carry on. Your story sounds much more exciting than mine.
Well, I'm excited about your business because you've really started something, and and things are happening. Maybe why don't you just share a little bit about your business? What is your business about, and how did it get started, and what is your vision?
That is huge. That is not a 5-minute thing, but so the bigger vision of my business is to change the way people live. But we're starting with BEE consulting and helping people grow and develop. But the bigger vision is to start a business process outsourcing house that serves the rest of the world from Africa, and also to create sustainable villages. So there's a lot which
Well,
you see.
that sounds
See that
exciting, and I think what you're talking about, Janine, is that what we've been talking about tonight is leadership, and leadership all starts with having a clear vision. And you've been using MAP to clearly define where it is you're going, what impact you're aiming to leave. And that for me is where leadership begins. So many people are wanting to get a position first. They want to get a title. They want to have an education. They want to have a degree. They want to, in fact, they're not even happy with the degree. They want to get their master's. And when they got their master's, they're still not satisfied. They become a doctor, and it just goes on and on and on. When in actual fact, you don't need any of those things to start leading right where you're at. All you need is a clear vision and know where you're going. And you certainly are demonstrating that this evening. I'm going to, in a moment, I'm going to bring Colton in. He's from down in the Western Cape, so I'm looking forward to chatting to Colton. But from this evening's talk, was there something specific that that you found that stood out for you?
Yeah, whenever you have a talk, there's always a lot of things. But I think is integrity is the one thing that stands out. Is everything that you do needs to. I was looking at my notes. When I look up, I'm looking at my notes. But integrity is about being consistent. You know, what you say you're going to do, you do, and you live your values. You live what you say you are, because it makes people comfortable, and it makes people feel safe, and they know that you'll come through for them no matter what, if it's within your power. So that's very important in leadership, because people can trust you and they can relax and know that they're in safe hands.
It sounds like, yeah, there's something that I've Anne and I have been talking about recently, and that is the need for stability in society, which starts with stability in the family, in essence, and by being consistent and being true to your word, I think you bring that stability that kind of settles people around you. I'm going to ask Colton to just briefly introduce himself. And in fact, maybe before I get him to introduce himself, Colton, maybe you can share something on this word of integrity. And I know Colton, because he comes from Cape Town, or at least that part, he loves to talk. So, Colton, we're gonna give you 1 minute to share some thoughts on integrity, because we'd like to hear how you got to know about Map for Life as well.
Well, evening to the guys. This has been a long time trying to at least enter this realm of you guys here having these nice gatherings. Integrity, it's a word that my dad used to banish around so often to us. And, you know, he wasn't just a father to us, he was a dad to us. And that is where the integrity comes in with his leadership ability. We're 5 brothers and 1 sister, and not one of us has ended any law problems, any wrongdoings that got us into trouble, etc., etc. And it simply was with the integral part when my dad indicated that when you leave here during the day to go to work, to go to your boyfriend, girlfriends, etc., remember what you portray outside is a reflection of your mother and I when it came to rearing you the proper way. And it's just amazing how that got us to sort of just behave when we were out of the home.
Yeah, what's interesting is, Colton, what you're saying there, what just struck me for a moment when you used the word integral part of something, and then you talked about the word of outside and inside, and I was just imagining that what happens outwardly is actually a reflection of what's going on internally. And so maybe what we project to others is a reflection. And you use the example of a reflection of mom and dad, and I'm sure there are many people listening that can identify with what you've said, because they've had a mother or father that have done the same thing. And don't go and embarrass us out there. And so there's this bit of pressure. But it's just reminded me of that link of integrity and integral was a very good use of words, and it made me just think about this link of outside and inside, and what people see on the outside might well be a reflection of what's going on the inside. But tell us just quickly before we continue with tonight's topic. Just tell us how you got to. Well, maybe I've said you're from Cape Town. Of course, that's generalizing. But maybe you can just tell us quickly where you're from and how you got involved with Map for Life.
Yeah. Well, very briefly, there was a little small advert in one of these newspapers that gets handed out to the different homes. And in there, in Durbanville, there was a church gathering where you, Glen, addressed the whole crowd of people that was there. And that was the first time I ever heard of Map for Life, and obviously was introduced to it indirectly. And I then had the opportunity to attend a short little program that was actually held by a gentleman there at the Durbanville setup. And from there, it led to me flying down to Pretoria and ended up doing the Map for Life program with you for the weekend. And yeah, what an experience that was. You come up with all the different type of ideas of who you are and how well you know yourself. And then you attend a program like this that virtually opens you up to really look from inside. Who are you really? Because before you can actually find yourself going anywhere, and this is where my dad used to brilliantly bring that across to us, before you can end up choosing a direction where you're going to, you first need to find yourself. You first need to know who you are. You first need to be happy with yourself. When you look in the mirror, you should be able to boast when you see that person. And until such time, you cannot do that. You're not really that ready to go and expose yourself to either leadership or to trying to attain a goal because you are not prepared and ready. And in my coaching activity, this is one of the things I've discovered with people going, attending so many programs, so many courses, so many different type of things. As you alluded to now, you'll get a diploma, and from a diploma, you go to a degree, then you go to a master, and then you go to a doctorate, etc., etc. Well, I've got a few master people that I am, to a small degree, coaching, that has just not found who they really are. And they're sitting with all that degrees. So a program like this has got a very good foundation on at least guiding you towards where you feel you would like to go to. But most important, where lots of my activity comes in surprisingly, especially with the type of people that I find sort of entering my environment, is people that is so highly qualified. It's people that are so financially well off and successful. And they ask me the question, or they ask themselves the question, what now? And that is such a difficult question to answer, especially now with the younger people that seems to attain things much faster and quicker than what the older guys done. So now at their 30s and 35s and before 40s, they virtually reached the peak of everything they would have liked to have reached. But there's a possibility of another 40 years laying ahead of them, 30 to 40 years laying ahead of them. And they're starting to panic. What am I actually going to do to improve myself between now and the next 30 years?
I'm just
And
thinking,
Glen and guys, yeah.
as you're talking about that, I was just thinking of the recent events where somebody was actively engaged in her day-to-day activities at the age of 96 and then passed away. And I'm just wondering, for many people, maybe they're thinking that they're going to get to the age of 70, 75, and then it'll all be over. But in actual fact, it could be many more years. And knowing or knowing that answer or the why to life, I think is really so important. So thanks for sharing that, because I think there's many people that are going to be watching this, and they themselves want to answer that question. Why am I here, or what next, or where to from this point forward? And that happens at so many stages in life, not just at the end of the so-called life line, but before we continue, I must just thank you for sharing your story, because when you talked about Durbanville and going to that session in the evening, it was just amazing how instantly I was right there, and I remembered that so clearly. And I remember when you came up to Johannesburg when we did the session. What's interesting is we usually fly down to Cape Town, but I found it interesting that you flew down to Pretoria, which is and then, of course, we all fly down, because eventually the plane comes down to land, doesn't it?
Right. Well, it was a nice break for me to leave Cape Town and to just enter another environment.
It was so nice to meet and to share that at that time. And I think Terence was part of that. We had somebody from Zambia as well that joined us at that session. Janine, right. What are your thoughts on what Colton has just talked about these stages in life, or where people find themselves suddenly faced with what next, where to from here?
Yeah, I was actually recently thinking about that, because I found a lot of young people are CEOs, CFOs, and that's sort of a pinnacle of a career. But what I find, they've achieved success, maybe not significance, because maybe they were chasing the success dream and not the significance dream, because your significance dream can carry you for the rest of your life. You will remain busy with that until you're 96 and you have your last meeting 2 days before you pass on, because that's a significant dream. It's something that impacts the world.
I think we need to encourage more people to be connecting with those kind of things. I was just saying to Anne last night, we were just having a chat. What's nice about the I've got to talk about a story, but before I do, we were talking about the meaning of life in a sense. And I just said to you, the way most people live their lives today, at the end, it was meaningless. They got the titles, they got the material things, they achieved success, they got the trophies, but they made no impact. I said, for most people, if I just planted a tree every morning, if I just went and planted a tree outside, at the end of my life, I would have achieved more than the majority of people achieve working so hard and doing all the kinds of things that they do. The funny part that we talked about was that based on what's happening in our country currently in South Africa, there's going to come a time in the future when between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m., the family is going to switch off the lights and they're going to have a chat around the table. And the children are going to say, Mom, Dad, why do we always sit around the table with the lights out between 8 and 10 in the evening? And the parents are going to say, well, come to think of it, I don't know. Grandpa and Granny used to do this. And when we eventually trace it back, we might get to that time where we discover that it was as a result of load shedding, which we're experiencing. And the reason we talked about that was because of the value that we are beginning to see that has come out of something that was initially created anger. We're now seeing that actually having quiet time together is valuable, and we can begin to grow together in relationship. And something that I didn't talk about this evening, which I think is really important, I used the word heart in listening to your heart, but was the importance of relationship, Colin. I think in terms of leadership, and you've been involved with a lot of students as a lecturer, and from what I gather, in listening to you on the many times that we've had the opportunity to speak face to face down there in the Cape, you seem to have worked on developing a relationship with the students. Why don't you just share some of your thoughts around that?
Well, my opening line to many of these students, when they do approach me with obviously all the uncertainties, I relate so many times to my dad, who was my coach and my leader and whatever. And he always used to tell us when we used to come home sometimes a bit frustrated or demoralized or something because of something that either occurred or happened or a result of something.
Yeah.
Then he always used to come to this thing that used to irk us. But it was such a reality. We could not sort of just not accept what he's saying. And he always used to indicate, remember, boys, well, and my sister girl, wherever you are today is due to a choice or a decision you made yesterday. And we used to try and argue this thing and say, Dad, no, but it wasn't, I didn't foresee this, or he says, the bottom line is you made a choice or a decision that led you on the path to where you find yourself now. It's not that you blamed, whether it's advertently or inadvertently, that's where it came. So now myself and one of my two brothers will now possibly have a bit of a powwow about it, etc. And then my dad would come in an hour or two later. And he says, but the positive thing is that a new decision you make today can change tomorrow. And that was such a fantastic type of hopeful statement. And that's the things I bring over to the students. I mean, so many of them tells me, we so much would have loved to have met your father. Because I relate so many of the things about my upbringing and the standard that my father has really not forced on us. This is so fantastic. This is so brilliant of the way he did it. You had the choice at all times. His aim and objective or goal was to inform you so that under no circumstances could we say we didn't know. And that was a tough one. I remember when we used to go out while we were at college and even while we were courting, etc., etc., just those words, remember what you portray out there is a reflection And I'm telling you, you would go out, and if you really want to get up to mischief, you indirectly hear my dad's voice behind or a tap on the shoulder. And then you just got that whole idea out of your head. And thank God I've got 5 brothers, 1 sister. None of us are drinkers and smokers or absolutely nothing. Not that there's anything wrong with it, etc., etc. But we just felt at all times, well, I can speak for myself. At all times, I wanted to know exactly the state I am in any environment or circumstance that I was. I've got students there that can't believe that I'm a non-smoker and a non-drinker. They can't believe it. They can't believe it. They says, how did you survive? Did you ever have girlfriends? Did you ever have this? Did you ever have that? I say, man, you can't let a substance actually dictate who you are, what road you're going to follow, and the path you're going to be on to end up with whatever your final destination will be.
Colton, your stories of your father, I think, are going to become famous. And the interesting thing about parents, or at least my own personal experience, and Janine, maybe you can share from your side. But I'm realizing that as a people, we tend to only see the value of our parents after they've passed on. I think of my grandfather, and while he was being a grandfather and there, we didn't appreciate the value that he was giving. But after he passed, suddenly all those gems started coming up, and we would talk about all the good things. And I wonder how we can in some way, and in fact, I think just tonight, by you sharing that story, is going to help others who are listening to this session and to the recording to actually start reflecting and saying, how am I being an example to my children and to those around me? What stories are they going to tell as a result of my life? Janine, what is your sort of experience from your parents' side, or the impact that they've had?
Okay, so my parents, my father was a very wise man, but he was a very quiet man, so he didn't say much. But a while back, I read a scripture that said, it's in Proverbs, it says, take the teachings of your mother and your father. And so I decided to study what are the lessons that they taught me. And, things that I learned by falling over and hurting myself, my parents taught me by the way they lived. So my parents lived very wise lives, but they didn't really talk much about it. Mm-hmm. But the lessons they taught me by the way they lived their lives were amazing. I mean, phenomenal lessons. Just a simple lesson, around finances. Mm-hmm. My dad passed away 8 years ago, and he's still looking after my mom. It's amazing. That's just one of the lessons. And so your parents are, if you just sit down and reflect on the way they live their lives, they're a gold mine of knowledge and, knowledge and, yes, it's just reflect on their lives. It's amazing.
So I think what we should be saying is, to all of those people that are our age and younger, they need to start listening to their parents and to start taking some of their insights wisely. Sometimes, Colton, when you were talking about your father saying certain things that as a child you can't understand, you disagree with, but over time, eventually you get to a place and say, my dad was actually right back then, and maybe you almost get to, I just feel now as we're talking, there's times when you would like to actually go to your father and say, thanks, Dad, for teaching me that, and it's too late now. He's no longer around. You can't go to him and say thank you very much. And so maybe for those who are listening this evening, if your parents are still alive, take the moment or take that opportunity just to go and say thanks. I really appreciate what you've done, because your parents are imparting wisdom in ways that you might not appreciate right now, but you will understand later.
Well, if I may interject there,
I'm listening.
One of the things that Lotz asked me, and possibly one or two of my siblings as well, is, you guys speak so much about your dad. What about your mom? And God in his wisdom. Okay, my dad was 8 years older than my mom. My mom is 87 now at the moment. And by the way, we're looking for a boyfriend for her. So if anybody is out there, please, because that woman is on the go 24 hours a day. At 87, there's just nothing that stops that lady. It's unbelievable.
Is she
But
still looking
anyways,
after you, Carlton?
oh man, she's still on the ball. She, we put up a 200,000 rand beautiful granny flat and everything up for her, and she says, "Man, did you ask me whether I want to live by children?" So in the end, we bought her a place out in Thornton, a lock up and go thing, and she's so impressed and made up with it. Yeah, the last 8 years she's living there now, and I think God in his wisdom got my dad to go to his final resting place. He was in his late 70s already. And this gave us the opportunity now to focus on mom. Now, dad had a way without even forcing it. You just find yourself attracted to him because he just had a way of being so interesting. It was unbelievable. But God in his wisdom has granted my mom the privilege now to be able to be made a fuss of that my dad used to have the pleasure or the privilege of all the time. And Glen and guys that's watching, what a fantastic blessing it is to get from my mom the type of input in our lives that portrays the two of them and their love and life together. Unbelievable. And as you mentioned now, Glen, that there are times you would like to speak to your dad or whatever, about something. I go to my mom. We go to my mom, and my mom will tell us, no, this is how your dad would have responded to that or approached about that, etc., etc. So you still got that link, but you're getting it now from a mother's point of view, from a mother's side. And it is such a privilege. And therefore, I tell you, it is so important for young people. I emphasize this thing. I emphasize it. Your parents are a blessing to you. Make a fuss of them. They are a blessing, God-given blessing. We've got the privilege of every weekend. We 5 brothers and 1 sister. So every weekend, starting the Friday to the Sunday, each one get the opportunity to have my mom for the weekend. We take her shopping the Friday, we take her out for the Saturday, Sunday we take her for lunch, etc., etc. It reached a point where sometimes she says, please allow me to have 1 weekend for myself. But that's how privileged we are and how blessed we are and how pleasurable it is to be able to have that privilege, to sort of have her around still and have that connection. Even though my dad is no longer there, but we've got that connection. And Glen, it's such a blessing. And when you talk about parenthood to kids, I've got my 3 daughters, and I tell you, they unbelievably find themselves to the point that we were not that very worried about them, because the foundation that was laid over here. I know one of the things that used to upset them terribly is when they used to go out when they were at college and all that, go out at night and so forth. I always used to tell them, remember, when you guys now come back home or whatever you intend doing, wherever you are, remember those guys over there. Now, remember my daughters, they would brush their teeth before they eat, after they eat, before they go to bed, after they go to bed, you name it all. hygienic as if it's going out of fashion. And I would always tell him, now remember, your hygiene is so important to you guys. When you go out there, just remember those guys that would like to kiss and smooch you. You don't know what they ate. You don't know what they sucked. You don't know what they, oh my goodness, they freaked out when I used to tell them that. But what a privilege. I have to be able to see how they reared themselves through their colleges, through their studies. I'm a grandfather now with 2 beautiful boys from the 2 daughters. What a privilege and what a blessing it is. And it all comes from the foundation that I, through God's grace and my parents' grace, the foundation was laid that I could carry forward.
It's such a good reminder of the value of both our parents and just bringing it back to leadership. We've been talking about the idea of personal leadership precedes organizational leadership, and
That's right.
That is true in the family as well. Hey, Janine, you've got to be able to lead yourself in order to be a good parent and to lead others. And we speak our mother tongue, so I think our mothers have a very significant role in our nurture and our growth. Thanks for bringing it back to reality. And of course, my mother's still around. Janine, is your mother still around?
Yes, my mom is still around, but she's not well. So.
She's okay. Well, let's hope that she improves, and that at least this time that you have with her, you can still engage in some meaningful way. Guys, we've been together for an hour already, and we could go on. And Colton, it's been so nice having you join us tonight, and we'd love to hear some more of those stories. So let's make this a habit of getting together in future. And I would just like to remind you as the panel that we're wanting to extend the map show to multiple days in the week. And so if there's a day in the week that really works for you, please take a leadership role and let's go and make it happen, because we need to share some of the things that we've learned with others so that they can help, or that they can also get on this journey of mapping their life and making a purposeful difference wherever they might be. Just before I play the outro video, maybe a last word, Colton, and then Janine, and I will then end the evening. So Colton, just one last word for the...
Oh, okay, yes. This afternoon I had a session with an Afrikaans guy, and his closing words to me is, "Meneer, vir jou wil ek weer ontmoet. Ons moet gesels." Because ek het nou probleme ontdek wat ek nooit geweet het ek het nie. En ek wil graag hê dat jy saam met my moet stap om hierdie situasie reg te kry. You know, it was such a fantastic closing line after a session we had now with a group of men out in Club Mykonos, you know, unbelievable. But as I said, I thank God for the opportunity and the privilege to be able to be, you know, a inspiration to people wherever I can.
Fantastic, great, and it's so nice to hear that you're talking on leadership and things of that nature. And we need to, I think, you need to spend the rest of your life in front of people. Janine, what is your sort of highlight of this evening, or your piece of, or your gem that you would like to leave the audience with?
I would like to say, find your passion and lead with love. And take care of those parents.
Thank you so much for both joining, and we will chat again for those of you here, we'll meet again, and it looks like my wife and I are going to enjoy a candlelit next 2 hours, just as we were talking about earlier. So have a wonderful evening. Great chatting to you. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Enjoy the evening.